So Ronald Reagan, it was well known by 1974, he put together Citizens for the Republic, and he was preparing to run for president, although he hadn't announced. And George Will wrote a number of scathing columns, personally attacking Reagan. And he said in part, here's a column in the Washington Compost, November 12, 1974, and the title is Ronald Reagan, the GOP, and 76, meaning 1976. And part of what he wrote, it was a really lousy, nasty column, but I can't read it all, but part of what he wrote, I really want you to listen to this, is, but Reagan is 63, he wrote, and looks it. His hair is still remarkably free of gray, but around the mouth and neck he looks like an old man. He's never demonstrated substantial national appeal. His hardcore support today consists primarily of the kamikaze conservatives, I guess they call us purists now, ladies and gentlemen, who thought the 1964 Goldwater campaign was jolly fun. And there's a reason to doubt that Reagan is well suited to appeal to the electorate that just produced a Democratic landslide. If a Reagan third party would just lead the Nixon was lynched crowd away from the Republican Party and into outer darkness where there is a wailing and gnashing of teeth, it might be at worst a mixed course for the Republican Party. It would cost the party some support, but it would make the party seem cleansed. That's Will smearing Reagan and conservatives who supported him, telling them, get lost, you can't win, it's going to be a disaster, and we need a cleansed party. And there's so many examples by so many. Former Republican Senator Chuck Percy of Illinois, considered a moderate to liberal Republican at the time, he said in 1975 to the New York Slimes, a Reagan nomination and the crushing defeat likely to follow could signal the beginning of the end of our party as an effective force in American life. Percy described as far out of the centrist stream, he described Reagan. Representative John Rhodes, Republican of Arizona, a moderate Republican. He became leader of the Republicans in the House, by the way. 1975, as soon as Reagan gets away from his cliches and his campaign slogans, he's in trouble. And I noticed throughout a lot of this, they play up Reagan as the doofus, as the guy that doesn't understand policy. And yet the amazing thing is Reagan was enormously well read. He was very deep. And his personal library had hundreds and hundreds of books from philosophers and so forth that you would never find in Barack Obama's library or George Bush's or any of them. 1975, Vice President Nelson Rockefeller warned Republican governors in terms of Reagan's run, no major American party, he said, can long endure by directing its appeal to a narrow minority. It will not serve the nation to have our major parties polarized at ideological extremes. That was Rockefeller. Remember the context. Reagan was rising up, building a conservative movement to take on whom? Gerald Ford and the establishment Republicans in Washington. He was preparing to run in a primary against a sitting Republican president. Can you imagine what they would say on Fox, what they would say at National Review and the Weekly Standard? Can you imagine what they would say on the pages of the Washington Compost with the pseudo-conservatives and all the rest? Republican Representative Pete McCluskey of California said a Reagan win would mean a disaster for the GOP. He said in 1976. Representative James Cleveland, Republican New Hampshire, he predicted another Goldwater debacle if Reagan is the GOP nominee. Houston Flournoy, California State Controller, front-runner for the California governorship in 1974 at that time. He told the Washington Compost's David Broder in 1974, the Republican Party's opportunity for victories in California and the nation depends upon the candidates it selects, the issues it develops. It's obvious that no major Republican candidates are going to be elected without the increasingly necessary support of Democratic voters. For a Republican to win in California, he must demonstrate convincingly that he is a progressive, problem-solving candidate, avoiding extremism on either end of the political spectrum. In 1976, Mills Godwin, the Republican governor of Virginia, publicly told Reagan to get out of the race against Ford. So did the Republican governor of North Carolina, Jim Holshouser. And on the eve of the North Carolina primary, the Ford White House orchestrated a telegram signed by a dozen Republican governors telling Reagan to get out. And Reagan won North Carolina. As I recall. So Reagan gets ready again. He almost defeats a sitting Republican president. And he, by the way, Gerald Ford and others blamed him for Ford's loss against Carter, just as they blame us for the Republican inability to win the Senate, just as they blame us every time they lose. And yet it was their candidate who lost. They lost. But in 1979, when Reagan was getting ready to run again, he was trashed again by George Will. He was trashed over and over again, including in the pages of the Wall Street Journal. November of 1979, when he announced his candidacy, among other things, the Wall Street Journal editorial page wrote, "For political packaging, we do not need to turn to a 68-year-old man." And there's so much of this, ladies and gentlemen, that we just started pulling together. And I decided to undertake this little project and present it to you today again. Because if you look on the internet, if you look at your newspapers, you're going to find some very odd columns from people you admire, trashing Ted Cruz, attacking the Tea Party. And what I'm telling you is, this isn't new. Almost 40 years ago from today, it was done to Ronald Reagan when he took on Gerald Ford. It was also done to Ronald Reagan when he took on the establishment in 1979 to win the 1980 Republican nomination for president. I wanted to give you a little bit of history because I want you to remain motivated and inspired, and I want you to understand that Reagan took the same course as you and I, as we are pushing today. He saw the country unraveling under Jimmy Carter. He saw a Republican Party incapable of doing anything about it, offering no vision, rejecting its own principles. Losers. And that's exactly what they were, and that's exactly what they are today. When they say Reagan couldn't win today, that's just bullcrap. Reagan would be nominated going away today. It would be the same establishment fighting him now as fought him before.